Where do you want to go next, Oliver? Maybe the Square Enix HD 2D games.
Oh, yeah.
We saw two of them in quick succession that sort of ended the presentation there.
The more interesting of the two is the pedestrianly named The Adventures of Elliot, which I don't know what Square Enix is doing with it. It's also set in like a name like sounds like Philadelphia. I can't even remember, but anyways, I
sounds like saying Philadelphia if you're drunk.
Yeah, if you're slurring, it's hard to say.
Slurring it like
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a little bit sick of the HD 2D look to some degree. I think it was interesting like 8 years ago, but this looks a little bit different to me. It looks kind of more like a PS1 game-ish, reimagined in some respects than like a SNES game. It has that mix of like that chunky 3D with the kind of blocky textures, and then of course the more advanced lighting tech and the sprites. But of course, a lot of PS1 games still use sprites, so looks quite good. My only real complaint is that it's dropping frames from 60 FPS in some places, which is not like the worst thing in the world, especially for a game like this, which is like more of an RPG, a little bit slower paced. It's perfectly fine, and it's mostly 60 FPS, but that's one area where I would like to hopefully see things tightened up a little bit, potentially.
There is a demo out, actually, Oliver, but I don't think any of us got to try it yet, so...
Oh, okay, yeah. And then there's also Octopath Traveler 0. I guess some kind of prequel or something here. It looks very similar to the other Octopath Travelers games. Yeah, it looks very similar here, and it's on Switch 2 as well as the original Switch and other platforms. There's some controversy about the fact that the Switch 1 version can't be upgraded to the Switch 2 version, which itself is another classic game key card, even though the download's only 5 gigabytes. So some kind of noise about that. But other than that, it looks, it's that kind of like classic burnt umber kind of HD 2D look to it that is not quite as visually exciting as I would say The Adventures of Elliot is, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, Adventures of Elliot, I actually have downloaded the demo, but haven't gotten to sink in yet. But that looks super awesome to me, because up till now, all the HD 2D games have been turn-based RPGs, which is awesome. But this is like a proper, more like, Zelda Mana-like action RPG. And I think that's really potentially very interesting and should be quite a different experience. I'm also happy it's like a new RPG rather than like a remake again, which we've seen plenty of as well. And it looks great. I'm very, very excited to play it, despite the extremely weird name. I don't know where that comes from.
They just must really like Elliot.
I mean, Square Enix loves weird names. Let's be clear. So that stuff's cool, I think. And Octopath, of course, I don't know for sure, but I think it is. It's like an enhanced version of the game derived probably from the stuff they did on mobile platforms. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. But speaking of HD 2D, they did actually... I guess I haven't tested it, but they released apparently an update for Dragon Quest III's remake, bringing it up to support Switch 2 with higher resolution and 60 FPS. So that's very cool. And it also made me wonder if maybe Octopath Traveler 2 could receive something like that, because those games on Switch 1 have pretty serious issues with frame pacing. They target 30 and they have bad frame pacing, which is not great. They would also benefit from that coming up here.
Okay.
So yeah, that's not the only RPG. Actually, we got a very quick look at Persona 3 Reload, which was announced for Switch 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was one scene in particular where they show him running down the hallway in School Building 2F. At the end of that hallway, as Oliver would very well remember, there are mirrors, that relied on ray tracing in all the other versions of this game. And I'm not seeing that here. It just looks like, if you look at the hallway there at the very end, it's just a flat, opaque surface with nothing on it. And that's ray tracing is not important to this game, I would argue. But and we don't know, maybe it is there, but I was very curious to see if this was going to end up being one of the first Switch games to ship with ray tracing support. And it's looking, at least based on this little bit of trailer, that might in fact not be the case.
Yeah, I would say that ray tracing is kind of unlikely here, not just based off of that shot, but also there's a shot in the classroom where you see those kind of window panes, right? And in the game on the Series X, on the PS5, on the PC, if you had the higher settings turned on, that would actually reflect this very clean, sharp view of the room as well. And maybe the angle there is not quite 100% perfect, but I think I would see a little bit of an impression of that reflection, and that's not here. And that's kind of disappointing in some respects because the RT reflections on PCs and consoles were very cheap before. They're running on the consoles at 60 FPS. I'd kind of hope that would be here, but it's not a huge deal for the game's overall visual presentation because they're very specifically used, in particular, in the non-combat sequences in the world of the game. They're used for like mirrors and other very, very glossy surfaces. They're not a huge part of the game, but yeah, not a part of the game here. I do have some other potential critiques as well visually. Unfortunately, I do have to say the game has some problems with its presentation of the frame rate. It runs only at 30 FPS, which is fine enough, I suppose, but it also has uneven frame pacing, which is really annoying. That is really annoying. And based on other Switch 2 games, that might not be solved necessarily by going into portable mode either, unless they've explicitly implemented like 120 hertz LFC here. That might not be the case, right? I would say input lag doesn't matter at all here. If they could just get the frame rate cap working correctly, that would be a huge boon. And this was also a problem on PS4, on Xbox One, on those last generation versions of the game that ran at 30 FPS. Huge problem with this game, huge problem with a lot of Unreal games. I hope they fix it. I don't think they will. There's also no DLSS presentation here either. The image looks quite raw, not very well treated. That's disappointing, but the PC version also didn't have DLSS, also didn't have FSR2, didn't really have any effective AA solution there necessarily. But overall, I think I'm happy about this. I'm happy the game is reaching a broader audience. I'm happy that the game is arriving on Switch 2. I think it's a good fit for the Switch 2. If you told me that the game was arriving on Switch 2, it fits graphically, visually, it works in the Switch 2. I think it does, and I think we see that from this trailer. It mostly does appear in a pretty good form on the Switch 2. And it's also just a good fit for mobile platforms in general because of the kind of pick up and play, kind of day-by-day nature of the game. It kind of has these natural stop points all the time when you're playing. Every 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. Save and stop and go and do something else, right? So I think it's a good fit for the Switch 2, but potentially not actually a great port necessarily because of those issues. But by far the biggest one there, if I could get one word out to Alice, is just please fix the frame pacing because that's really irritating to me and will really wreck, I think, a lot of people's appreciation of this game's visuals.
Hey, and Sega's listened to us before, the monkey ball situation, if you recall, last year. I think it was last year. So got word back to them, and they actually did correct the frame pacing. So, well, actually, in that case, it was more like the Unity 50 hertz thing. But still, this should be similarly feasible to fix it.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk Hyrule Warriors.
Wait, Rich. I think you're missing something, buddy.
Go on.
The biggest game of the show, Chillin' by the Fire. Where you roll up on this beach and you're making fires and roasting marshmallows and giant floating smeary 480p looking video streams of your buddies can stand next to you.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing. And you can all just chill on the beach, I guess. In fact, this feels like I'm looking at an Oculus DK2 demo from a decade ago. So yeah, baby. I know. I'm feeling like we should probably do the next direct. It should have been this one, realistically, in Chillin' by the Fire.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
You're not convinced?
No.
All right then.
Maybe we should be talking about Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment.
Okay. Perhaps.
What do you think, Oliver? Because it seems to be shaping up quite nicely.
I think it looks all right here. I think it looks pretty decent in terms of the way they've constructed the visuals, in terms of the way they built it out. But there are some notes here that I wanted to touch on. It looks like it's using FSR1 or something similar to that, just in terms of there's some edge enhancement going on, and that edges have that distinctive FSR1 roundedness to them. Obviously, we've seen this a lot in Nintendo's own titles, but here it seems to be applied in a little bit of a less elegant way, I would say, than some of Nintendo's first-party fare. I counted it out a little bit here in terms of pixel counts, and it was counting out a little under 1080p. In prior showings, it's counted out closer to 720p, and in other clear shots I was able to count here, so perhaps there's some DRS involved. It's also running at 30 FPS, which we've seen again in prior showings as well. I do kind of wonder, I think this is the kind of game that would really benefit, if at all possible, from a 60 FPS update. Would benefit, I'm sure, a lot from the adoption of techniques like DLSS. And it's kind of unfortunate that even in the kind of second-party fare that Nintendo is producing for Switch 2, that we're not seeing some of those elements. And I'm honestly not 100% sure why we aren't seeing the adoption of techniques like DLSS here. It could be for a number of reasons, but it certainly seems like something that would be a fairly prudent thing to do, especially considering all the pixel crawling you tend to see in games like this, and the massive hordes of enemy foes and all the kinds of aliasing that would engender does not seem necessarily too positive here. But yeah, I think this is shaping up to be a game that at least runs a lot better than Age of Calamity. I'll grant that. It looks a fair bit better than Age of Calamity, so by that standard, I'm sure it will be a perfectly fine Warriors-style, Muso-style game. But by the standards of people who are looking at Switch 2 and kind of expecting that kind of real next step in terms of we're delivering this real next level visual experience, I'm not sure that this game is necessarily showing off so well.
Do you agree there, John?
Yes, I do 100% agree. And I was thinking, I really wish we had one of those, Men in Black style, memory erasing devices to, it's okay, you've never seen FSR1, Nintendo. Get rid of it. Wow. I'm tired of it. It's not a good choice here. But I guess I would say, though, Oliver, you're right when you mentioned the previous game, and that's why I feel just having a stable 30 FPS is already a gigantic improvement over what that was on the original Switch, right? So, expecting them to get to 60 FPS from there, that's that might be quite a reach. So, I think this it works visually, though, just because the style is good as before, and so I think that holds up all right. But yeah, it's, I'm not super into Muso style games these days.
You used to be fully on board, John.
I enjoyed them for a while. I liked them on PS2, during the PS3 era. Stuff like Gundam Muso and everything was quite fun. And some of the others, were quite good, but the formula hasn't evolved that much. To be fair, I guess the Zelda ones have done some cool stuff. So, we'll see. I'm still interested enough to give it a shot.